730 days. That was the amount of time I had to pay for a crime I never committed. 2 years within 4 gray stone walls. 2 years for a father to realize that his only son was a demon masquerading as a human being. But today, those iron gates opened. I was going to take everything back. Welcome back to Dad's real-life revenge. Grab a glass of water, some snacks, get comfortable, and remember this: the people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing, they simply chose wrong. Leave a number 1 in the comments so we can continue the story, and hit subscribe. You're going to love this story. I stepped outside. The blazing midday sun made my eyes ache. The old suit from 2 years ago now hung loosely on my frail body. But my bones had not rotted away. My mind even less so. The presence of the man who once stood at the head of the Ford Corporation could not be erased by a wrongful conviction. A luxurious Bentley was parked right outside the gate. The car door opened. Preston, my son, stepped out in an expensive suit bought with my own money. Beside him was Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, wearing the same fake smile so often seen across newspaper headlines. Dozens of reporters rushed toward us. Camera flashes burst non-stop. They wanted to capture the moment a billionaire family reunited. They wanted to see a guilty old father shedding tears before the generosity of his devoted son. Preston walked up to me. He spread his arms wide. He hugged me tightly in front of the cameras. His audience would be moved to tears. But right beside my ear, his voice came through cold and filled with contempt. "Old man, if you know what's good for you, keep your mouth shut. The company has just recovered. One stupid word from you will wipe tens of millions of dollars off the stock price. Go straight home and stay in your corner." I did not push him away. I smiled faintly. A smile that concealed death itself, one a conceited man like him could never recognize. I whispered back, "Son, have you managed the company well these past 2 years?" Preston froze for a split second, then burst into loud laughter for the reporters to hide his unease. Tiffany stepped forward. She carried a child wrapped in a soft silk blanket. She held the baby toward me with a look full of defiance. "Father, hold your grandson. He has missed his grandfather so much." I looked at the child. It lay perfectly still. Not a single breath. Not a single cry. My sense of smell caught the scent of fresh plastic. It was a high-end silicone doll. A perfect prop for their performance before the public. They were cruel enough to use a fake child to strengthen the public's loyalty and sympathy for Preston's chairman's seat. Preston leaned close to my ear again while the cameras kept flashing. "Starting tomorrow, I'll cut off every bit of your support if you dare cause trouble. Your medicine, your servants, all of it will disappear. You're nothing but a penniless ex-con now. Remember that." I stood there, watching the Bentley slowly roll away, after they had taken enough perfect photographs for tomorrow's front page. They left me standing alone in the crowd. They thought they had won. They thought an old man who had spent 2 years behind bars would tremble in fear before their power. They had forgotten the supreme rule of business. The one who builds an empire always knows how to level it when it becomes stained. Preston, you made a fatal mistake. You showed me that you are so weak you have to rely on cheap performances. That chairman's seat was mine, and I know every single screw that built it. I hailed a taxi back to Ford Manor, the estate I had personally designed and owned for 3 decades. Every brick, every row of trees carried the memory of Beatrice, my late wife. The cab stopped in front of the towering wrought iron gates. I walked to the biometric security panel at the main entrance. I pressed my thumb against the fingerprint scanner. A red light flashed. A mechanical voice echoed through the silence. "Access denied. User not found in the system." I tried again. The same glaring red light. Preston had erased his own father's fingerprint from his father's home. He wanted to sever the last remaining tie between me and the world I had built. He wanted me to understand that I no longer had a place to belong. Just then, the wail of police sirens erupted behind me. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop at the entrance. 4 officers stepped out with their hands resting on their holsters. One of them approached, fixing me with a stern stare. "Harlan Ford, we've received a report from Mrs. Tiffany Ford that an unknown individual is attempting to unlawfully enter private property. You are in violation of a no trespass order." I stood still with my arms hanging at my sides. A bitter smile crept across my face. Tiffany had planned this script in advance. She wanted me to return to prison the very day I got out, this time on a trespassing charge. They weren't willing to give me even the smallest chance to hold my head high. One of the officers pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Step forward, Mr. Ford. We need you to cooperate." Just as the cold steel was about to close around my wrist, another set of screeching brakes shattered the moment. A sleek black sedan pulled up along the curb. The driver's door opened. Attorney Garrett stepped out carrying a thick leather briefcase. He walked straight toward the officers and held up a stack of documents bearing the red seal of the Supreme Court. "Stop immediately. My client, Mr. Harlan Ford, has every legal right to be here." The officer frowned and accepted the documents for review. Garrett turned to me, giving a slight nod that reflected the unwavering loyalty he had shown for more than 20 years. He then addressed the officers with complete confidence. "This is the official last will and testament of Mrs. Beatrice Ford, co-owner of Ford Manor. Under Special Clause Number 4, Mrs. Beatrice Ford established an irrevocable lifetime right of residence for her husband. Regardless of who currently holds legal title to the property, Mr. Harlan Ford has the legal right to reside here until his final breath. No one has the authority to remove him, including the current chairman, Preston Ford." The officer carefully examined the court seals before looking back at me. He returned the handcuffs to their case. "Our apologies. There appears to have been a procedural misunderstanding." The officers got back into their patrol cars and drove away as quickly as they had arrived. The iron gates of Ford Manor slowly swung open using Garrett's remote access device. I looked down the long driveway leading to the mansion. Preston and Tiffany were undoubtedly standing behind those grand windows, watching this first reversal unfold in humiliation and fury. They believed the law was just another toy they could manipulate. But they had forgotten one thing. The law is written by people with minds, not by people consumed by greed. I pushed open the massive wooden doors of Ford Manor and stepped inside. The air was saturated with Tiffany's expensive perfume. I walked straight upstairs toward my old study, the place where I had spent countless sleepless nights building the Ford empire. I turned the doorknob. The room had been completely transformed. The antique oak bookshelves were gone. The peaceful landscape paintings had disappeared. In their place stood treadmills, weight racks, and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Tiffany had turned my sanctuary of knowledge into her personal gym. My chest tightened. I looked around for the one thing that truly mattered, Beatrice's portrait. It was the only thing I had ever asked them to leave untouched. I hurried down to the storage room beneath the staircase. The space was dark, damp, and cluttered. I searched through piles of battered cardboard boxes. Then I found her. Beatrice's oil portrait had been tossed carelessly into a corner. The gilded wooden frame was broken. Worse still, a long tear ran straight across her gentle face. A high-heeled shoe print stained the canvas. Tiffany had done it on purpose. Rage surged through my veins like black fire. They hadn't just stolen my company. They were trampling on the soul of the woman who had built it beside me. I pulled the portrait into my arms, my hands trembling with fury. Footsteps echoed from the storage room doorway. Preston stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking at me with open disgust. Tiffany lingered behind him, lazily chewing gum. Preston pulled a thick stack of crisp polymer bills from his wallet and threw it directly at me. $500 bills scattered across the filthy floor. He smirked. "Here's $500 for your pocket money, old man. Consider it a reward for behaving yourself and not making a scene with the police earlier. Tonight we're hosting a small reception for our business partners in the main living room. Every guest is someone important. If you know what's good for you, take that torn painting and hide in your room. Don't drag your prison face out there and embarrass the Ford family." They turned and walked away, Tiffany's mocking laughter echoing through the hallway. I didn't pick up the money. I stood, brushed the dust from my clothes, and fixed my eyes on the collar of Preston's overcoat as he disappeared. Earlier during the commotion outside the gate, I had slipped a tiny listening device into the fold of his collar, a small gift from Garrett. I returned to the little room hidden in the corner of the mansion. I switched on the receiver and slipped on my headphones. Static crackled through the speakers. Then Preston's voice, followed by Tiffany's. Every word came through crystal clear as the reception downstairs began. I sat alone in the darkness, listening without making a sound. I was a shark, and my prey had just swallowed the hook. But the secret conversation captured by the bug revealed something far more horrifying than I could have imagined. A sinister conspiracy was preparing to devour the entire Ford family fortune. And the true mastermind was not Preston. He was trembling in fear before an invisible force. Who was it? I took off my headphones. Darkness filled the small room around me. My mind drifted back 6 months to the time when I was still behind bars. Through the cloudy glass of the prison visitation room, Garrett slid a classified file across the table. It contained the records of a newly emerging financial entity known as Nemesis Corp. Sitting in Garrett's sedan immediately after he rescued me outside the gate, he laid out every detail. Preston believed he was a financial genius. He had secretly diverted Ford Corporation's capital into the cryptocurrency market, convinced he could double the company's fortune. Instead, he suffered catastrophic losses. To cover the financial hole before the board of directors discovered it, Preston had no choice but to sign a confidential $12 million loan agreement with Nemesis Corp at a crushing interest rate. He pledged his personal shares and control of the family's logistics division as collateral. Preston never knew one simple truth. Nemesis Corp was not some anonymous foreign investment fund. Nemesis was me. I had used every hidden asset I had accumulated over 30 years to build this trap while sitting in prison. I knew my son's nature. He was greedy, arrogant, but hopelessly lacking in foresight. He wanted to prove he was smarter than his father, so he was willing to gamble with the company's future. I never tried to stop him. I chose to remain in the shadows and back him into a corner. I handed him the rope so he could hang himself. Those were the exact words I said to Garrett that day. Now, the deadline for the $12 million loan had expired. Preston was completely incapable of repaying it. The financial noose was tightening around my rebellious son's neck. He stood on the edge of bankruptcy while pretending to be a powerful chairman at tonight's gala. He believed I was nothing more than a frail old man who had just walked out of prison without a penny to my name. He had no idea. Every dollar he was spending, the car he was driving, even the house he was standing in, were already subject to my decision. I rose to my feet and looked at myself in the mirror. This thin, worn-out appearance was the perfect disguise. A true shark never hunts in shallow water. It waits in the deep, where its prey never sees it coming. The pounding music from the gala downstairs began to echo through the mansion. Every guest had arrived. I put my headphones back on. Preston's furious shouting exploded through the receiver the moment the reception downstairs ended and the last of the guests had left. "Have you lost your mind, Tiffany? Are you trying to blackmail your own husband?" Tiffany answered with a sharp, mocking laugh. "Husband, you're nothing more than a worthless man drowning in debt, Preston. If it weren't for me framing the old man and sending him to prison, would you ever have sat in that chairman's seat? Now Nemesis Corp is coming to collect. Do you really think you could keep that from me? I want $5 million transferred into my personal account before tomorrow. Otherwise, every file about your motorcycle accident from 2 years ago goes straight to the police. You know exactly who hired the man that ran the old man off the road." My fist clenched. My anger turned into an icy chill that ran down my spine. So the motorcycle crash that had nearly killed me 2 years earlier had never been an accident. My only son and my daughter-in-law had plotted to murder me for my fortune. When I survived, they planted false evidence and sent me to prison instead. I removed my headphones and walked out of the room. I headed straight for their bedroom. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open without making a sound. Preston and Tiffany spun around in shock. The color drained from their faces the instant they saw me. Tiffany opened her mouth to scream. I raised a single finger. Silence. The look in my eyes was as sharp as a knife, and she froze. I walked directly to the wall behind their bed. A large piece of artwork concealed the family's high-security safe. I entered the same security code I had never changed in 30 years. Click. The safe swung open. Both of them stared in utter disbelief. I reached inside and pulled out a dusty blue file. Turning toward Tiffany, I spoke in a calm voice that carried unmistakable menace. "You think you've got your husband cornered, Tiffany. You've forgotten who pulled you out of the gutter and brought you into this house. You're blackmailing him over the motorcycle crash. But what about your personal trainer? Who do you think bought and registered the motorcycle he was riding that day?" Every trace of color vanished from Tiffany's face. She staggered backward and grabbed the edge of the bed. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Preston turned toward his wife, suspicion and fury burning in his eyes. "What are you talking about, Tiffany? What personal trainer?" I smiled and tossed the file onto the floor at their feet. A hunter always knows every corner of the forest. They believed they had deceived me. In reality, they were nothing more than puppets dancing inside a trap I had built long ago. I turned and walked away, leaving the two of them standing in a room filled with fear, suspicion, and growing distrust. The alliance built on their crimes had begun to crack. But my reckoning was far from over. There was still someone I had to find. The one person whose life they had destroyed simply because he carried the true bloodline of the Ford family. Where was my real grandson? I left Ford Manor in the middle of the night. Behind me, Preston and Tiffany were screaming at each other, their voices echoing through the mansion as they traded accusations. They were too consumed by panic to notice me climbing into Garrett's sedan, which was already waiting with the engine running. The car carried me away from the bright city center and toward a rundown neighborhood on the outskirts of town where the dim streetlights could never quite drive away the darkness of poverty. We stopped in front of a shabby little diner that reeked of old cooking grease. Through the fogged window I saw Sarah. She had once been my eldest daughter-in-law, an ordinary young woman with an honest heart. Now she was painfully thin, dressed in a faded work uniform, bending over as she wiped down dirty tables. In the corner, a little boy no more than 4 years old sat quietly playing with a chipped plastic toy car. Danny, my grandson, the only child carrying the true bloodline of the Ford family. I pushed open the door. The wind chime above it rattled softly. Sarah looked up, ready to greet another customer. Then she froze. The rag slipped from her hand and landed on the floor. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Father, you've been released. I walked over and gently rested my hand on her shoulder. Her frail frame trembled beneath years of heartbreak and humiliation. I turned toward the little boy. Danny stared at me with bright, intelligent eyes that looked exactly like mine when I was young. I lifted him into my arms. Without the slightest fear, he wrapped his little arms around my neck. Through tears, Sarah told me everything. 2 years earlier, immediately after I was arrested, Tiffany had fabricated an affair. She had bribed a stranger to stage compromising photographs with Sarah. Using those fake pictures as an excuse, Preston abandoned her, cut off every source of financial support, and threw her and Danny out with nothing. They did it to clear the way for Tiffany to move into Ford Manor as the rightful lady of the house, while legitimizing her fake child to seize the entire inheritance. I wiped the tears from Sarah's face. Looking straight into her eyes, I spoke with quiet certainty. Sarah, you've suffered long enough. Today, I'm here to bring justice back to you and Danny. The people who crushed the two of you will pay 100-fold for what they've done. I reached into my coat and placed a black bank card in her hand. Take Danny and leave this place tomorrow. Go to the 5-star hotel downtown. Garrett has already arranged everything. Your days of suffering are over. I walked out of the diner. The night air was bitterly cold, but it was nothing compared to the hatred burning inside my chest. The final piece of the truth had fallen into place. Preston and Tiffany's cruelty had gone far beyond the limits of ordinary human greed. They didn't just want money. They wanted to destroy every decent person around them. Garrett opened the car door for me. He looked at me with a solemn expression. Mr. Harlan, tomorrow morning, the Ford Corporation Board will hold an emergency meeting. Preston intends to sell off the logistics division to a foreign conglomerate to raise the money needed to repay Nemesis. A cold smile spread across my face. 9 o'clock in the morning. The Ford Corporation boardroom was filled with unbearable tension. Preston sat at the head of the table, beads of sweat forming across his forehead despite the air conditioning running at its coldest setting. He spoke nonstop about his plan to sell off the logistics division, the lifeblood of the company, to a foreign investment fund. He needed the money to repay the $12 million debt before Nemesis Corp foreclosed. The shareholders whispered among themselves. Many clearly disapproved, yet none dared openly challenge the young chairman. Just as Preston raised his hand to begin the decisive vote, the double doors of the boardroom were thrown open. I walked in. Beside me stood Attorney Garrett and 2 of the building's former security guards, men I had helped years ago and who had now returned to stand with me. A wave of shocked murmurs swept across the room. Preston shot to his feet, his face twisted with panic and rage. He slammed both hands onto the table. Old man, who gave you permission to come in here? This is a confidential Ford Corporation board meeting. Security, throw this convicted criminal out. The 2 security guards remained perfectly still. Neither of them moved. I calmly walked toward the head of the conference table. Looking directly into my son's trembling eyes, I pulled out an empty chair and sat down without the slightest hurry. My voice was calm, steady, and commanding. Preston, you still haven't earned the right to throw me out of this room. I laid the first brick of this corporation, and I remain a lawful shareholder. Preston let out a forced laugh to conceal his fear. A shareholder? You transferred every share to me 2 years ago. You don't own a single share of Ford anymore. Face reality. Attorney Garrett stepped forward and placed a legal file on the table, turning it toward the shareholders. He spoke with unmistakable authority. Mr. Harlan Ford no longer owns personal shares. However, today he is here as the sole legal representative of the Employee Stock Ownership Plan Trust. The trust currently holds 15% of Ford Corporation's outstanding shares. Under a special provision in the company's founding charter, representation of the trust automatically returns to the founder whenever the sitting chairman commits a serious breach of business ethics. The color drained from Preston's face. His eyes darted from the documents to the shareholders surrounding him. The trust's 15% voting power, combined with the opposition of the company's longtime shareholders, immediately blocked Preston's proposal. The representatives of the foreign investment group stood up, gathered their documents, and stormed out of the boardroom in frustration. Preston's desperate sale had collapsed. The financial noose tightened even further around his neck. I looked at Preston as he slowly sank back into the chairman's seat, utterly powerless. The battle in the boardroom was over. But it was only the first fatal shot. I still had one more task that had to be completed immediately. Every lie they had built was about to collapse. If you've stayed with this story all the way to this point, then there's a good chance you've enjoyed it. Please take just a quick moment to help us by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Leave a number 5 in the comments so I know you've made it this far, and include the name of the city you love. Many people watch without doing that, but it costs you nothing and means the world to us. After leaving the boardroom, Garrett and I drove straight to Central International Hospital. Our next target was Dr. Elias Thorne, the physician who had signed the birth certificate for that fake grandson. A dark medical secret was about to be exposed, and one terrified accomplice was about to face the truth. I walked into Dr. Elias Thorne's private office at Central International Hospital. The room was thick with the smell of disinfectant. Thorne sat behind a polished glass desk. He looked up at me, and confusion immediately flashed across his face. He recognized me. The man who had once been the hospital's largest donor to its medical research foundation. Thorne cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Mr. Ford, I'm very glad to see you've been released. Unfortunately, I have another patient scheduled right now. Please contact my assistant to arrange an appointment." I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the chair across from him and calmly sat down. Attorney Garrett stepped forward and placed a tablet on the desk. On its screen were 2 medical files displayed side by side. One was Tiffany's authentic medical record from 3 years earlier, diagnosing severe ovarian cysts that had resulted in infertility. The other was a birth certificate bearing Thorne's own signature, certifying that Tiffany had given birth to a healthy baby boy the previous year. Thorne stared at the screen. The color drained from his face within seconds. Large beads of sweat formed across his forehead. He stammered, There must be some mistake. I don't know where these documents came from." Garrett spoke in a calm voice, as cold as a verdict. "Dr. Thorne, these are copies extracted directly from the hospital's secure servers before they were deleted. You accepted $200,000 from Tiffany's secret account to falsify these maternity records. This isn't merely a gross violation of medical ethics. It also makes you an accomplice in a scheme to fraudulently seize the Ford family's assets. The maximum penalty is 12 years in prison and the permanent revocation of your medical license." Thorne trembled. The pen slipped from his hand onto the desk. He looked at me with desperate eyes. "Mr. Ford, please understand. Tiffany threatened me. She knew about mistakes I made years ago. I had no other choice." I looked at the man falling apart before me. My compassion was not reserved for those who chose to help evil. I pushed a blank sheet of paper and a pen across the desk toward him. My voice was cold. "Write your confession. Every date, every payment she made, every detail about the fake child. If you cooperate, Garrett will request a suspended sentence on your behalf. If you refuse, your name will be on the front page of every major newspaper tomorrow morning." Thorne didn't hesitate for even a second. His hand shook violently as he began writing line after line of his confession. When he finished, he signed it and stamped it with his official seal. The horrifying truth now existed in a formal legal document. Tiffany had never been pregnant. The grandson Preston and Tiffany proudly displayed before the media had been nothing more than a despicable fraud designed to steal my chairman's seat. I picked up the signed confession and rose to my feet. The noose had tightened to its final notch. Preston and Tiffany believed they would be safe tonight at their extravagant wedding anniversary gala. They had no idea. The most valuable invitation of the evening would be delivered by my own hand, and the glittering stage they had prepared for their celebration was about to become a courtroom of the mind before the eyes of the entire social elite. The crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom of the five-star hotel, the sound of champagne glasses clinking, the elegant music of a live orchestra. Everything reflected the glamour of high society. Preston and Tiffany stood at the center of the stage. Hand in hand, they smiled brightly beside an enormous wedding anniversary cake. Below them, hundreds of business partners, investors, and reporters applauded enthusiastically. They were celebrating at the very peak of their deception. Just as Preston lifted the microphone to begin his speech, the music suddenly died. The sound system crackled with a burst of static. The massive LED screen behind the stage instantly went black. Confused whispers spread throughout the ballroom. Preston frowned and motioned for the technical staff. But the person who emerged from backstage was not a hotel employee. It was me. I walked onto the stage wearing the elegant black suit Garrett had prepared for me. Gone was the frail old man who had walked out of prison wearing clothes that hung loosely from his body. I stood tall once again. A king had returned to his kingdom. Preston and Tiffany froze. The microphone nearly slipped from Preston's hand. He stammered, "What are you doing here? Where's security? How did they let him in?" I walked calmly to the center microphone. My voice echoed throughout the ballroom, overwhelming every trace of their panic. "My apologies for interrupting your celebration. But today, as the founder of Ford Corporation, I have a few special gifts for its current chairman and his wife." I nodded toward Garrett. The giant LED screen immediately lit up. Displayed across it was Preston's $12 million loan agreement with Nemesis Corp., every page visible in crystal-clear detail. I addressed the audience. Preston Ford's $12 million loan is now officially in default. Effective immediately, Nemesis Corp. Is exercising its legal right to seize every share pledged as collateral, along with all personal assets belonging to Preston Ford, including Ford Manor. And for anyone here who doesn't already know, I am Nemesis. An explosion of shocked voices swept across the ballroom. Camera shutters fired nonstop. The color vanished from Preston's face. His knees buckled and he collapsed onto the stage. But the judgment was not yet complete. I turned toward Tiffany. She was trembling as she quietly tried to slip off the stage. "Don't leave just yet, my daughter-in-law. The second gift is for you." The LED screen changed once more. Dr. Elias Thorne's signed and sealed confession appeared before the audience. Beside it were the genuine DNA test results concerning the fake child they had used to deceive the public. Cries of disbelief echoed throughout the ballroom. The truth stood naked before everyone. Tiffany had never been pregnant with Preston's child. The supposed Ford heir had been nothing more than a lifeless silicone prop in an elaborate scheme to steal my family's fortune. Tiffany collapsed to her knees. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed in utter humiliation. Preston stared at her with the wild eyes of a man betrayed beyond imagination. He lunged toward her. Hotel security restrained him before he could reach her. At that very moment, police sirens screamed outside the hotel. The ballroom doors swung open. A team of financial crime investigators and police officers marched inside. They walked directly onto the stage and presented arrest warrants before the two of them. "Preston Ford and Tiffany Ford, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to fabricate evidence, and making false statements before the law." Cold steel handcuffs snapped shut around their wrists before the eyes of the entire media. My revenge had reached its final, satisfying conclusion. Their masks had fallen. The rotten empire they had built crumbled completely beneath my feet. The officers led them away through a storm of angry shouting from the crowd. Preston turned his head one last time. He looked at me with the desperate eyes of a cornered beast. I stood behind the thick glass partition of the detention room. On the other side, Preston sat curled up in a dark blue prison uniform. His face was gaunt. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. Nothing remained of the arrogant chairman he had once been. The moment he saw me, he rushed toward the glass and slammed both hands against it. He broke down in desperate sobs. "Father, please. Tiffany deceived me. She forced me to do it. Please withdraw the charges. I'm your only son. I'm your own flesh and blood." I looked at him. My heart did not stir. The coldness of a predator had frozen the last trace of compassion within me. I picked up the telephone receiver. My voice was calm, steady, as sharp as a razor. Preston, blood may be thicker than water, but it can also carry poison. When a branch has rotted and threatens the life of the entire tree, a wise gardener does not hesitate to cut it away. I gave you everything. You chose to repay me with greed and betrayal. This sentence is one you wrote with your own hands. I set the receiver back in its cradle. Then I turned and walked away while his desperate screams echoed behind me. The reckoning was complete. The rotten branch had been cut from the Ford family tree. 1 month later, I stood in front of Ford Corporation's headquarters. Attorney Garrett handed me the official documents establishing the Beatrice Ford Foundation. Its mission was to provide legal and financial assistance to elderly people who had been abused or abandoned by their own children. Every dollar recovered from Preston's forfeited assets had been transferred into the foundation. Money has value only when it serves justice and compassion. Thank you for staying with Dad's real-life revenge until the very end of this story. Join our community by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more gripping family stories. And as always, thank you for being part of this community. The golden light of sunset settled over a neighborhood soccer field. I sat in the stands smiling as Danny ran across the field with his friends. He scored a perfect goal. Then he turned, waved proudly toward me, and smiled. Sarah sat beside me. The color had returned to her face. Her eyes were filled with peace and happiness. The true bloodline of the Ford family would now be raised with kindness and love, not with greed and deception. My story stands as a bitter reminder. Whether in business or within a family, unchecked greed is always the shortest road to destruction. Never use the bond between parent and child as an excuse to tolerate evil. A new legacy had risen from the ashes of betrayal, stronger, wiser, and built upon humanity instead of fear.